Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 645th New Social Environment. I'm Raven, the Special Programs Associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Deborah Buck and Chloe Stagaman. We're thrilled to welcome poet Barbara Henning here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter, and that here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for actual necessary decolonial work, but a reminder of place of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustained and enriched the stolen land that we are speaking from. And now to introduce today's guests and hosts. Exhibiting professionally since the 1980s, Deborah Buck explores the interplay of surrealism and abstraction in her work. Interests in absurdity, romanticism, and the darker side of fairy tales lend a strong narrative to her practice. Deborah is involved in arts education in New York as a member of the faculty at the School of Visual Arts Master of Design program and as a trustee of the Pratt Institute. She is the founder and director of the Deborah Buck Foundation, which supports organizations working to reverse the marginalization of women in fine arts. And our host, the Rail's very own director of programs, Chloe Stagaman, is a curator, writer, and a writer working with artists in public spaces with 10 years of experience, working nationally and internationally on programs, site-specific commissions, art in residence programs, and cultural partnerships. And now to pass it over to you, Chloe.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Raven, and thank you, Deborah Buck, for being here today to talk about your work. We are here on the occasion of an exhibition that features your work called Figures Transformed. And my first question is a broad stroke question. Give you a chance to say a little bit about yourself at the start of this for those in the audience that may not know your work as well. The exhibition Figures Transformed, curated by Christina Masada Strassfield, features artists Hal Buckner and Strong Cuevos and yourself. Are you able to give us an overview of the body of work featured in the exhibition, but also relate that overview with the title of the exhibition, Figures Transformed? Because figures, especially, which we'll find as we review your work, are often elusive in your work, much more so than with the exhibiting artists that join you in this exhibition. And so would love to hear you speak to how the figure configures itself per se in your practice and in your work at large.
Thank you. And it's great to be here. And I'm really thrilled to have the chance to have this conversation with you, Chloe, and with the Rail. So let's see. So Christina Strassfield, I've known for about 6 years. And when she called and said that she wanted to have me be the third artist in this show, she said, I want you to look at the other artists' work before you say yes or no. And also, I want you to know that we're going to hang your work salon style, which she did. But yeah, it's true. Hal Buckner's work is very, very figurative. You know, he says it's a celebration of the female form. All of his figures are nude. And Strong Cuevas does a great deal of heads or faces, but not really so much the actual full figure. But I understood why Christina Masada Strassfield decided to do this, because we all are very involved with line and with the black line defining form. And so I understood immediately when I looked at the other's work why Christina wanted me to be in this show. And, you know, it's funny because it's made me rethink my work, and it's made me rethink about the figure. And I don't even really think of them as figures so much as we were just having this conversation. They're like friends, you know, or they're totems or they're shapes. Because I think I too tend to think very traditionally when I hear the word figure. And I don't think that my paintings use the figure in a traditional way, but I suppose it's a new way of thinking about the figure. The figure is disjointed, or it's parts of the figure, and it represents something, or a presence, but not necessarily the full human figure.
Yeah, that's great. And one of the things, and audience members will see as we go through these works in the show, is the sense of your figure and the sense of your hand across the works each time through your line making, as you say, but also through smudging, through layers, through each of these characters, which really feel like they have an intimacy with you specifically. And so I'm wondering if you can speak a bit to your process when making one of these. We're here now at Garden Committee. How did this work start? How did it come about? And when you're looking at the blank canvas, how do you know where you're going to go?
So let's see, the work all begin kind of the same way. They begin, this particular painting is not on paper, but the rest of the works in the exhibit are on paper. This is on board. So I begin with an abstract wash of color and paint, because it's paper and it tends to curl up. So you got to get it wet in order to get it to lie flat and to start work. But it's kind of like warming up a musical instrument, the actual sort of splashing the paint on it and making this wash kind of is my warm up. And then after that, I begin to take chalk and work abstract shapes into the wet paper. It's kind of a language of abstract shapes that I use. It's sort of a lexicon that I have of these rounded kind of funny shapes and sort of tree-like shapes. And then I kind of step back and sort of look at what I've got and try to think like, okay, what's being suggested? Like, what has my subconscious suggested to me to talk about or to delve deeper into? What can I find in this abstraction to push and pull? And then I begin to, sometimes I get a clearer answer than others. It depends on what's happening in my life or what's happening, in the world too. And then I begin to work with the ink, and the ink kind of creates a foreground to the colorful background. And then, I take off from there. And again, continuing to ask, what do I want to talk about? What do I want to see here? And then frequently, the paintings end up having many, many layers. I'm fearless at painting over something that doesn't work. And frequently it's the thing that I like the most, that I think, oh, I really got that head. Great. That's good. That's really great. And then that's the thing you have to take out because the whole is not working. Which I think is a great lesson to be able to absorb. So frequently the thing that, I just got, it's just tricky enough, right? It just looks, it's the thing holding everything else back, because the painting has to really be unified. It has to be like a symphony, different pieces all working together to make this image. And then I just, it's the layers and digging in and trying to find things that make my heart sing to paint about. And usually, and then I have to say, okay, so who is this? Okay, so, all right, this is, so in this case, okay, these are these bird-like hens. Where are they? I don't know, let's put them in a garden. Maybe they're in a party. Okay, so let's put the garden in. Okay, and so what's the relationship between them? Well, these two look like they're like, passing judgment on someone that they're talking about. Oh, but who is it? That person's not represented. So then, boom. So then you get the third character. And then I use a lot of crowns, which comes from, I think, reading a whole lot of fairy tales, but also they designate power. like within a relationship, a social relationship. So in this case, this prince sort of character has the crown, and this sort of two older birds are talking about him. But I leave it open-ended as to what do they say? Are they criticizing him? Is he doing a good job? I don't know. That's for the viewer to like bring and answer those questions themselves. I want to create questions for the viewer.
Thank you for that. In an earlier conversation with you, we were talking about anthropomorphizing and the role that has in your practice. But that's something you've been doing since you were really young. Can you speak to the role of anthropomorphizing? I mean, we've already sort of heard you speak to it a little bit, but how has that inspired you overall as an artist with these characters and with how they evolve?
Well, you know, as a young girl, as a kid, as a child, I grew up on a farm outside of Baltimore, and I spent a lot of time alone. And I had a brother and a sister, and there were dogs and cats and animals and horses and mules and, you know, lots of four-legged friends. But I spent a lot of time alone. And I also read an incredible amount. And I read a lot of fairy tales, like Grimm's fairy tales, and all the the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales. And anyway, and you know, I have a very, very vivid memory of like sitting next to a stream and thinking, and seeing a frog and thinking, I really wish that frog was bigger and he could talk and he wore a crown like they do in all these stories that I'm reading. That would really be fun. That would really be great. That would entertain me enormously. And so I think I make these paintings in a way to make the world more interesting for me. I would like to be able to walk outside and see something that looks like these sort of characters that are on your screen. I think that so they keep me kind of company, and they create this world that's a lovely addition to what's known as the real world. But I don't know, what is the real world? It gets fuzzier and fuzzier these days.
But they also they feel really connected to the real world, especially sometimes to the menace of the real world and to the unpredictability of it. And in a similar vein to some, you know, like the British sculptor Laura Ford, who thinks about, you know, the dark side of fairy tales through sculpture. They do sort of talk to darkness. And in this one in particular, I'm glad we're here holding up the house. You know, I saw it for the first time and really thought about, it's a very adult painting, even though it's kind of about something imaginary. It speaks to, maybe, at least to me, the process of making and sustaining the idea of the house. And it feels like the idea of the house, because of this kind of ongoing conversation with dreaming, or with the world beyond the world as we see it at first sight. So, you know, do you find that even though you're sometimes looking back at imaginary friends or imaginary characters, that you're also kind of inserting, maybe unconsciously, anxieties from adult life to these childhood visions or fantasies?
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, there's you know, I really am very interested in layers, like layers, physical layers in the painting, but also layers of meaning in each painting. And so I'm frequently painting about dualities. For instance, and sometimes I'm not even sure exactly what the totality of the image is until afterwards, when I'm looking back at it. And in this case, I was painting about, you know, sort of nighttime out in the country in this house, and the house had a dark basement, and the house was kind of wonderful, but it had some scary stuff to it because it had been built pre-Civil War. So there was a basement that had a big cauldron still. The big cauldron was still in the fireplace. There were outdoor ovens and ice houses, and all in terrible disrepair. But I thought it was kind of romantic myself. But anyway, so I was kind of thinking about in my childhood, like we had all been asked to take part in taking care of this farm and taking care of this house as children. And I was kind of thinking about, what that was like. And it was a lot to be asked. I had a corn stand when we had to pick the corn and sell the corn. And anyway, but after this painting was finished, and there is an element that speaks to the formalism involved, like the painting has to work formally. You're constructing an image, and it has to work on a sort of gut level for me, but also as far as a composition. So anyway, and this painting is done, and then I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, oh yeah, okay, so what? And then I'm like, wow, there were 5 of us in my family, and there are 5 hands. Now I didn't think, oh, there were 5 of us and I put 5 hands in. I just put 5 hands. And then I went, oh, and there are 3 little eyes, and there were 3 children. Oh, and there are 2 big eyes. Oh, there was a mother and a father, and there are the steps. And oh my God, I just painted my childhood house. So it's kind of interesting, I feel very lucky that I get to have this kind of self-exploration through my work. I think it's a gift. I think it's a gift to me. And yet I think that this painting works for anybody looking at it, about, a house and the people in it, and the mysteries of any given house. The mysteries of living together, of people living together, it's a big mystery. How do we make it work? So,
and what about these eyes? Because in many cases, I feel when I look at the paintings, I feel like I'm in your mind. I feel like I'm experiencing something from your past, or a reiteration of something that you're experiencing. And then these eyes kind of look out and kind of confront the viewer in a very interesting way. And I'm curious if that's the intention, if it's sort of to create a pull with the audience, or if it's more speaking to supervision, to surveillance, to some of these other things that might be in the background, or maybe both.
Really good question. So the eyes started after a trip to Egypt. And I've always been fascinated by Egypt. And 4 years ago, I actually got to go and felt very, very lucky. And I mean, I've used eyes, and I've always been interested in the figure and the eyes and that kind of thing, but they haven't been front and center the way they have been for the last 4 years since I went to Egypt. And, the Egyptians used the eye, the sort of all-knowing eye, and they put it everywhere. And I kind of thought, I just am very attached to looking. It's about looking. That's what I spend my life doing, is looking. And when I'm in the process of painting, I'm looking at what I've done. I'm looking at what I'm going to do next. The way that I interact with the world is in a very, very visual way. What do things look like? The way things look makes me really happy, or kind of puts me on edge. Probably much more than most people. And I was aware, again, as a child, that I was looking harder at things, that I was looking at things in planes of light and dark, and what pleased my eye. And I still look at the world that way. So is it the mind's eye? Is it the eye's mind? I'm not sure, but it's one of them. Anyway, but I think it's also, sort of, it's a way of marking that I'm present. I'm there. I'm looking, I know, I'm thinking, I'm asking questions. And all, you know, because sometimes there isn't an actual figure, as I said, but there are these hands, there are arms, there are eyes. So it's a way of housing a figure in a painting that maybe doesn't have a figure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think it's interesting too, because many of these fantasies are animalistic, you know, or you know, show animals or depict animals. And while they feel very fantastical and very mental in one way, they also feel very interwoven with the natural world, and are always seem to be observing nature or connecting the mind to nature in one way or another. And I wonder if you think about nature a lot in relationship to your work, especially given your early stories about growing up on the farm. You know, does painting, do you happen to think about the paintings in relationship to nature quite a bit, especially this body of work for Figures Transformed?
I'm always thinking about nature. I mean, I'm always thinking about nature. Now, I'm not really a nature lover.
Yeah.
You know, I'm an indoor child, as they say in the South.
Yes.
I was much happier like painting at the kitchen table than, you know, out, you know, riding my bike. But anyway.
But here, for example, with Horse Thieves, you have this
Right.
like very bucolic kind of landscape, and the horse almost feels like this like something's awry with this horse, like something is going wrong, like the horse is the horse is being taken somewhere against its will.
He's not happy. That horse is
No.
not happy.
No,
He's
so
not happy. No.
yeah, and in this case, it's like the painting, and I think in many cases with the painting, it's a call to connect with the environment and connect with nature and the animals and creatures within nature in an endearing and a very personal way. And you know, in this case, that's, you can really see that. I love the boots on the horse.
That's me just having fun. That's like, you know, what does this horse want to wear?
Yeah.
Red cowboy boots, right? You know, it's also interesting, and this is an association that I just made right now, which is kind of what's fun about all of it, is that my sister rode horses. And she had a horse, and there was a little pony too that kept a company in the ring, in the corral, or whatever you call it. Anyway, but I took some riding lessons and stuff, but I was always quite sure that the horse did not want me on its back, that the horse really just wanted to be by itself, and it did not want me plunked up on top of it. And so it's funny, you know, I'm just kind of wondering if that was sort of, you know, in my head as I was painting this horse, quite possibly. Because and I never found horses to, like, I've never understood the equestrian like love of horse, because I always found them terrifying. I mean, absolutely scary. I figured they could kill you. So I think that's probably why I painted this horse like this. And yeah, so again, it's the duality of this bucolic place, and there's the happy little house with the smoke coming out, but something is going on with these three characters, and it might not end well. And this, I think, was also about property. Like, who does the horse belong to? The horse is property. And, you know, one has her arms stretched out. So is she taking the horse away? Is she giving the horse? In either event, property is being moved, exchanged. And that's why I called it Horse Thieves. But so, you know, there's that duality of, you know, it's like Westerns, you know, from the 50s. I mean, they're just gorgeous, right? And these horses flying across, but, you know, it was really tough, hard living. and you don't see that. But so anyway, yeah, that's where this painting comes from. That's what I was sort of stewing on.
And what about color? You know, how do you think about color when you're making these?
So for me, color is very instinctual. I don't know, I'm not sure. I might have a very like elevated sense of color. I think I see things in terms of color. I mean, I look at everything as its color, its shape, its form, and so when I'm painting, that's the part of my process that is actually very kind of subconscious.
Mhm.
I feel the color, and I know that sounds like fly around the room, but I'll think, that I'm thinking this is like a witch's brew. This is like these sorcerer's chalice, right? And I'm using stuff from the elements table. But I'm creating like a new kind of brew. So that's why it's called newfangled physics. So I'm taking something that's very absolute and turning it on its head by putting it in this painting. So it just feels very instinctual, like, this is brew. This is like witch's brew. Like, so, okay, yellow, green makes sense. And then, then there's a piece of it that's actually kind of formal, where I think, okay, I really want to, make these lines that are in the back. I need to pull them, I pump them up to give them a little bit more pow. So, okay, let's use that red, against this sort of muted grays, and let's use this green. And so I don't know, I'm definitely a colorist, and I understand, like Alber's theory makes so much sense to me. And the notion of a color is really only the color that it is because of what it's next to, and where it is and what the light is and stuff. So I always kind of want to get almost the most out of every color I can to work for the painting.
That's great. And Raven, I think we can keep going here. This one's also a great one. Put that thing away. Do you want to tell us? Do you want to tell us a little bit about this one before I launch into my next question? Yeah. I'd love to talk about this one.
Okay, so let's see. This painting started, and it's interesting because we were talking about dark sides of fairy tales, and the sort of cartoon fun versus the dark realities that are also present here. And so sometimes, when you're talking about something that's difficult, I mean, I've made plenty of like screaming, barking dogs and gnarling, whatever, things with lots of big sharp teeth. But this whole way of working seems easier to talk about things that are different. In this case, this started as a painting about Helen of Troy. Again, I use history a great deal, and ancient stories, present stories, period. So this was Helen of Troy, but frequently they're female figures that I'm painting about, because I don't think we have really enough female heroines that are celebrated constantly. So I just, put them up on a pedestal and make a painting about them. So here's Helen of Troy, and the figure on the right was like the Trojan horse. And then as I was painting, there was yet another school shooting, a mass killing. And I was like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What can I do? I don't know what to do. I can't change this. So the Trojan horse then became this armored weapon, armored car, armored, whatever. But I decided to sort of make fun of it and put the like sort of beanie propeller on the top of it, and it's blowing bubbles instead of bullets. And she's just saying, put that thing away. Like, you don't scare me, so that was really kind of how this one came about. So yeah, it was me talking about guns and why there are too many of them, and just like put them, like, let's just get rid of them. It's not working. It's not working. Put it away. So that's that one.
You know, in the past, when you've talked about your work, you've said on multiple occasions that you're not trying to make the work cute. And in many ways, that's, I would imagine at times, especially in painting, you know, fairy tale figures, that's a task, and thinking about how to create them in a way that they're speaking to your personal hand and memory and your relationship to these figures. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to that as well. And it's very difficult to not make them look cute.
What was the question? Is it difficult not to make them look cute?
Yeah.
No.
No.
No. No, because like I'm not, you know, I don't like cute.
Right.
You know? Cute's not something that, you know, that I'm about. Exaggeration is something I'm about, but cute is not. And you know, sometimes I exaggerate the figures, and I make them have like really big ears or a big head and a small body and that kind of thing. But yeah, no, there's nothing cute about them. And if you look at them long enough or hard enough, you know, you'll see that there are underlying things that are like maybe not so good. You know, this looks like, you know, a garden, and hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. But I'm like, what's that snake doing up there? And what's that serpent over on the other side? And what really is actually going on here? Right. And so this painting was basically, you know, about people who are not reacting to what is wrong in our world, in our democracy, in our country, and who are just like, well, you know, I can't change it. I can't do anything about it. So I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm just going to shut it all down. I'm going to turn off the news, and because I can't fix it. I can't do anything about it. But that's not really good enough for me. And I always feel like I need to be very, very informed about the world that I'm living in, even though I'm creating these other kind of pretend worlds. But I'm a news addict. And I'm always trying to better understand the real world while I'm making these other worlds.
Yeah, and you can really feel. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
They're just like the shapes are rounded, you know, and which makes them kind of cartoony, but again, like I don't feel like this is silly. Like and this one's called Shoulder to Shoulder, and this is again about kind of this mob mentality. And, you know, we saw that come to fruition on January 6th. But this was talking about that kind of, you know, the GOP's mob mentality about you're either with us or against us. There's no gray area. Right. And if you don't like my politics 100%, then you're not with us. And we're going to just, you know, mobilize and get out of the way, which is kind of scary. So again, I'm not interested in painting the figure and making the figure realistic. I'm just not interested. I'm interested in the figures. Like, let's go back for a sec. Can we do that? Or is that, we can't go back?
Yeah.
Okay. So for instance, like I could have made, you know, like a whole bunch of kind of Trump cartoon characters screaming, yelling, being ugly with their mouth open. But somehow I feel like this is more psychologically present and important. because these are not recognizable figures, and because they don't have sharp edges. They're soft, but the fact that they're all clumped up together and coming at you makes them menacing.
And well, and really creates a group, right? Or a grouping, and that understanding of group and mentality. And
and that's what this painting was about. That's what I was thinking about, was like, you know, the what is divisive in our country right now, you're with us or you're against us, not let's meet in the middle.
And what of the titles? You know, often the titles are really go hand in hand with the works themselves. Do you title the work at the start, or do you title it at the end, or are you thinking about the title along the way?
No, it's funny because when we were talking about the process, and I was talking about the starting abstractly and then working into them, I wanted to say that that at a certain point, and sometimes it's early on, and sometimes it's after struggling for days and weeks on something and painting over and over and over and wiping it off. But when I get the title, that's the beginning of the resolution of the painting. So, you know, this painting, if I remember correctly, it actually started vertically and then it got switched and stuff. And they all kind of go clockwise a lot of times. I take them down and put them vertically or put them horizontally. But I like to use like a turn of phrase that, or like an old wives' tale, like a leopard never loses its spots. Every tub stands on its own feet. My grandmother had a lot of them. But there's a reason for all those things. They're a way of teaching, using words and phrases and stuff to teach, you know, others about what you know, or at least it was. So once I get the title, sometimes it's a song title, or it's but it's frequently, this one's called Songbird. But once I get the title, that's usually when the resolution has taken place, and I can say, oh, okay, all right, this is a songbird, because I was thinking I want to make this painting about music, and you know, they went through many revolutions, as they all do, which you can see, you know, in this one. You can see the painting over and the like residue of what is left behind. And so then I thought, oh, you know, a songbird. Okay, so let's do a bird. So I kept painting this bird, and it just looked too sweet. It just was too like, ugh. So, but I just kept going. And then I thought, well, you know what? You never make things that just look like the thing. You're making a bird look like a bird. You never do that. Like, what's up with you? So, and I went, oh, the feet. I love bird feet, like big, cartoony bird feet, like those roosters from Warner Brothers, like like a cock-a-doodle-doo rooster, right? You have this big feet. So anyway, so once I made these enormous feet on this bird, you know, it kind of, then it was like, aha, it's a songbird, and that's a song, and you know, and then it was done, you know. So, but frequently, once I get the title, and I think of it means we're home stretch. But so all that to say is that these paintings are very hard won. They're very hard won. They have to really sing. They have to be, their content has to be spot on, at least for me. Their content has to be spot on, their composition has to be spot on, and they have to talk about something that's kind of important, whether it's personal or whether it's something that should be important to everyone. And whether I'm even aware of conveying that or not. So the titles are really, really important. And this one is, so this is a great example. So this is called The Empty Gift. And and this one is very thick. This one got painted over and over and over and over until I just kind of whipped up some paint and really beat it up to get the life back into it. Anyway, but so she's holding an empty box, and clearly she's sort of a princess or a queen, and this is a young boy who's either a prince or he might be the king. But those are all like questions that one could ask looking at this image, and I want the viewer to ask those questions and see if they can make up the story or what's going on for themselves, because they don't have endings, and the story could be a million different stories. So I want the viewer to actually use their imagination when they're looking at these paintings, and a sense of wonder. So I wonder, like, did he give her the empty box, or is she going to give him the empty box? And is that their house or their castle? And who are they? And why is he wearing a mask? You know, so but so the painting was formally resolved, and then the questions remain. And so the Buddhist expression, the question is the answer, has always made a great deal of sense to me. Because as long as you're asking questions, then you're going forward.
Yeah.
Learning, then you're in the present.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know we haven't gotten a chance to really speak to the other two artists in the show, but was there anything about their work in relationship to yours that really surprised you in the context of the exhibition? Or brought out something in your own work to you that you hadn't realized before?
Well, I mean, it was really interesting because Strong Cuevas is 93.
Mm-hmm.
And Hal is in his 80s. And I'm in my 60s. So they were like a whole generation from me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a great time with Strong Cuevas talking about how men and women paint, and we did a panel talk, and I was saying that I think that men and women paint differently, and she said, "Oh no, absolutely not. Men and women paint exactly the same. There's no difference whatsoever." So we kind of did a round and around about that. And I understand. And she uses just her last name because she's 93. So that many years ago when she was working, no one would have taken her seriously if she had used Elizabeth, which is her first name. And I know that even I remember my senior crit in college, and the whole art department was there, and you put your paintings up and the whole thing. And one of the faculty looked at me and said, "You paint like a man. That's the highest compliment I can give you." And I thought, wow, you said that? You said that? You really said that? Those words actually came out of your mouth. So it was interesting. It was great for me to be in a show with a woman who had so many more years of discrimination as a woman artist than I have. So that was kind of cool. And also she works with ink and does these faces that are spare, but the line is very, very, very sure. So I really believe and love the quality of line. And so we kind of bonded over that and the use of the ink. And for me, this is Sumi Ink, which is Japanese ink. And I kind of came to the ink probably about, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that. And the ink really kind of changed my work enormously. And it gave it a freedom, and it gave it a speed that it hadn't had before. It also created foreground background, which I'd always kind of, I tend to just want to paint like a thing, or a figure, you know, and it's like, do I have to put them somewhere?
Right. So they're often placeless, you mean? Like they aren't necessarily linked to a specific, yeah.
Because I want them to live in psychological space.
Right.
I don't really have the need to flesh out like, oh, there are 3 little houses behind them and there's a park bench, and, you know, because in that way, that's why I say I don't feel like I'm a figurative painter, you know, because I feel like I'm a surrealist painter using figures, or an expressionist painter using figures and animals.
Yeah, and in that way that our mind uses figures when we tell ourselves dreams, right? Or when we're going through, you know, some form of experience in our unconscious, or processing information. I love this one as well.
It's pretty good, right? I like this one too. You
took us back to school and your days at Crit, and that's a perfect segue for me to ask about Skowhegan and your mentor Clifford Still. Are there things that you learned from Clifford Still when you were learning how to paint that you still think about today?
Yeah, I mean, there were mostly he taught me how to think, not how to paint. And he said to me, and I was young when I met him. I was like in the end of high school, and I graduated from high school at 16. So I was young, but completely driven to paint and to become an artist, and had never questioned that ever in my life, that's what I wanted to be. And, you know, I always say, like, my first toy was a pencil. That was like the first thing that, you know, I found something amusing to play with, was a pencil to draw. So anyway, he said to me, don't go to art school, because nobody's going to teach you how to paint. You know how to paint, because you don't need art school. He goes, but what you do need is to learn as much as you can learn about the world that you are inhabiting. Because if you want people to take your work as a painter seriously, you have to know what you're talking about. You have to know what questions you want to ask. You have to know what it is that you want to present. And it has to be informed. So learn about religion, learn about politics, learn about science, learn about anything, whatever. Anyway, you get it. Language. And so I went to Trinity College because it was on the East Coast, and it was challenging academically. And they also would let me get have a major in fine arts and take any classes I wanted. So, you know, I took history of the Middle East, and I took psychology and poli-sci and like all of these, you know, but still got my major taken care of. So I think that was one of the most important things that that he taught me. And I think he was right. He was right, at least for me. I think that there are probably lots of young artists who are well served by going to art school, but for me, I just needed that information. I was that kid. I needed that information. I needed, the info. And he basically told me, don't listen to anybody. We got along like a house on fire. But yeah, he was like a big wizard. And I've said, when I've spoken about him, that although, he was considered irascible and difficult, and I didn't know that person. The person that I knew was very accepting and encouraging to me. And I think like one of the biggest gifts that he gave me was 5 years ago, a friend who had some business at the Clifford Still Museum in Denver, where I had not been, because I got the feeling that they at the museum didn't know anything about me, and I didn't know how to say hi. I went to Skowhegan anyway. So because nobody had contacted me and said, you knew him, he sent you here, like what? So anyway, my friend Dan was in Denver at the museum, and he sends me a text, and it's a photograph, and he says, look what I found in the archives at the Still Museum. And I looked, and I recognized my own handwriting. And Mr. Still and I had written letters a great deal, like while I was at Skowhegan, and while I was in school, and up until when he died, which was 1980. And but he had saved all of those letters. He had also documented his letters to me, and all of those were in this box this big when I got to the Still Museum. And so that was really lovely. That was really lovely, post-mortem, to find that, that there was something really nice about, I don't know, what he saw in me, and that I actually was doing it. And it wasn't very easy for me, but I just kept doing it. Anyway, wait, can we go back? Because I really like that painting. These are earlier paintings. This is like 1991. I was living in Boston at the time. And I was making these paintings of these figures that were kind of stick figures. Again, they're figures, but I'm abstracting them because I'm putting them on sticks.
Right.
So again, in my own way, I'm not making figures, but I am, clearly. I mean,
well, I love these because you really get the sense of what you were saying before about placelessness, especially in these early works. You start to see the figures emerge, and they're in these very murky mental spaces, like these in-betweens that are filled with color and blur, and really, really cool. I love,
like, if I put where he was or spelled it out, I'd feel like I was decorating. Like I mean, something's on fire behind him, but you don't really know what it is. But obviously that's not good. And that's really all you have to know.
But he looks so calm.
Oh, he's very calm. So, but that's because he's got his TV. And he's got his TV on his belt. And he just loves TV. And as long as he's got TV, he's okay. So it's about, mindlessness and letting the TV be, like your friend. But I actually was walking to my studio in Boston one morning, and somebody had taken a can of spray paint and had written that graffiti with an eye and a heart and TV. And they'd written it on like a Jersey barrier that was put up like near the train station. And I thought, wow, somebody likes television enough to like destroy public property, to vandalize, to risk getting arrested. And they feel so strongly about it that they need to like share that with the world. I love TV. And I'm just like flabbergasted. And it really stuck with me. So I made this painting. It probably started out as something else. and then turned into Mr. TV. I remember being very happy when I painted his belt.
Right. Good. Well, that's what I was going to say. The belt is a TV.
Yeah.
It's a TV on Mr.
Uh-huh.
TV. Yeah.
Yeah. That made me very
No,
happy.
and these are when, and if you keep going, Raven, there's some more of them. They're really the earlier investigations into these figures, some more abstract than others.
Yeah, this was I
Jailbird.
had a buddy who got arrested for smoking pot in a car. So this was about that. Jailbird. Yeah, but again, and yeah, she's one of my favorites. That's called Nude Jewels. And that was that's sort of about, aging. And we, women as rites of passage get a big diamond. They get jewelry for when you get engaged. You get your big gold necklace when you're, married for 25 years and that kind of stuff. And so she's pretty happy with her new jewels. But so, yeah, so I was really thinking about that a lot, and how in some way we compensate women for what they've lost, which is youth, with jewelry. Expensive clothes. Well, she's kind of wearing clothes and she's kind of not, so hard to say, but she's definitely got on the big jewels. So anyway, so that was sort of but that's the kind of stuff I think about when I'm painting. Right. And sometimes, it's sort of in the background, and sometimes it's foreground, and I get caught up, in the figure. So like this is and this is called Palace Secrets, and there was again a bunch of figures that kind of looked like this, where their bodies were angular but their faces were very fleshed out. So, things are not quite right wherever he is. It's dark. He's very wary. But he has to be, because he's in the palace and he's a young king by his headdress. So he has to be very careful, and he has to be very wary. And I think, again, you see me like trying to avoid the figure in that one.
Right.
I'm avoiding the figure. I'm avoiding hands, feet.
You are and you aren't. I mean, there's a face, so there's someone. There's always sort of the implication of a person.
Right.
Either
Exactly.
through anthropomorphizing or through, hands. It's really fun to hear you speak about this form, though, which is it's almost ethereal and floating above.
Right. And really... again, you didn't need to know where he was. All you needed to know was that it was lighter around his head and it was dark where he was, right? So, and it's lighter around his head. He's thinking, and that's my way of animating him.
Right.
But it is interesting about, I just don't want to make realistic figures. I just, well, it's sort of like why I would never make a landscape. And I always say, and I think that, they're beautiful, beautiful landscapes. And I think there are people who dedicate their life to painting landscapes, right? Which are fantastic. But my feeling is that, like, I can't improve on what I'm seeing that nature has made. I can't improve on that. And there's so many beautiful, beautiful figure renderings, paintings of people that are rendered perfectly. So so why am I going to try and do it even better? Like, that's not interesting to me. So I have to make them my way, in a way that makes sense to me, and hope that speaks to some collective consciousness, that I'm speaking about something more than, where the hip bone meets the leg bone. And did I get the proportion right? Who cares? What I'm really talking about is emotions, process, you know. So he didn't need his arms and his feet and stuff, because everything I want you to know about him is he's in some way royal, right? Because he's wearing his, you know, crown and stuff. He's wearing this purple mantle. And I just didn't really see where hands and feet were going to get me in with this painting. So like, I put excess information in, I guess.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially in relationship to the rest of your inquiries in the paintings.
Yeah, right.
I-
So
I
I had
had
a
one
great time
last.
actually looking at all of this work together when we were putting these, when I was putting these together for you. You know, there were so many connections amongst the work that I hadn't even seen before in my mind's eye, that I was able to put together from looking at this work of 40 years.
It felt appropriate to have this up for my last question. You are an artist, but you also have a foundation dedicated to supporting institutions who encourage the work of women in fine arts and change, and who are empowered to change an often male-dominated narrative. Are you able to speak to that endeavor of yours and its impact on your artistic pursuits as an artist?
Sure. Okay. So I started the Deborah Buck Foundation 3 years ago, 3 and a bit. The mission is to support institutions that are actively working to reverse the marginalization of women in the fine arts. I know that, you know, when I was in college in the 70s, I thought we'd won the war. I thought, wow, you know, it's great. You know, we're not back there. But I wasn't a professional artist yet. And once I became a professional artist, I very quickly realized, oh, wow, okay, something's not balanced here. And, you know, at that point, I mean, my Jansen's History of Art had no women in it when I graduated from college. Not one, 0. So, but I thought, okay, well, that was then and this is now. And, you know, what, but, and as I went on, I realized that, you know, I kept being put into shows called 3 Women Paint. Women, Where to Now, et cetera, you get the drift. And I thought, well, look, why can't I just be an artist? Why do I have to be a female artist? Why do I have, you know, why? So, and you know, the numbers are still atrocious. And you know, they're statistics. I mean, let me just pick one. Okay. In 2018, just 24% of the 27,000 artists shown at art fairs in 2018 were women. Art fair sales that year totaled $16.5 billion. So, you know, I think nothing really does the job like numbers. And when you can use numbers like that to make the case, I mean, I know that, you know, I'm probably preaching to the choir right now, but that, you know, there's still a lot of work to be done. And my feeling is that, that I understand changing the world one life at a time, saving the world one life at a time. There are many foundations that fund individual artists, which I think is brilliant and fantastic. My feeling is, from where I sit as an artist, that unless we really change the institutions systemically by putting women in power at the top of these institutions, that we're still going to have these miserable numbers, even though the art world has become a bit more inclusive. The numbers are still horrendous, especially, you know, in the museum world, in the auction world. And so I decided 4 years ago, my mom died. She had an apartment. I owned half of it. She gave me the other half. And I thought, okay, I can take this money and I can invest it. But you know what? I really need to do something about this. I really, and this is money that I didn't have before. She was 87 when she died, and I'm doing fine. So why don't I really take this money and really change my life and try and change the world that I'm in? And so that's how I started this foundation. And it's been extraordinary. It's been to become a philanthropist within the art world and be an artist. It's a little tricky sometimes, but I kind of don't care. I just don't care. I think that that what I'm doing, I'm very, very strategic about the institutions that I pick to give grants to. I don't accept solicitations. So, for instance, when the Baltimore Museum declared 2 years of 2020 and said that they would only purchase work by women for 2 years and that they would only exhibit work by women for 2 years, I was like, well, right on. Guess what? You get a grant. In fact, we'll give you, so actually it's with the Brooklyn Rail. We created something called the Stepping Up to the Plate Award. So every year there's a page in the Brooklyn Rail, and I announce the institution that I think made the ballsiest move to realign women in the art world. And that's my shout out to them. And of course they get a grant. And it's really helped, with this notion of like, okay, so I'm probably not going to end up in the Museum of Modern Art. I mean, don't even get me started on the Museum of Modern Art, but at least I will have this foundation, and at least I will have encouraged people who have sort of begun to awaken to how completely disproportionate the role of women as artists is in our public institutions. And I feel that it's a great privilege to be able to do this. I understand that I'm lucky enough that I could make that decision and say, okay, well, all right, so you don't get a new car or whatever, but you get to do this. You get to do this. So, and you get to do it well. And it was a great, I'm very happy that I made this choice, and I feel very, very grateful that I get to do it. Also, it's interesting because I think that as artists, it demystifies kind of how museums work, how larger arts institutions work, because I get to go and meet with the director or the curator, and they may not be interested at all in my work, and that's not why I'm there. I'm there to talk about, wow, you took a risk. Way to go. Way to go. You're showing this woman's work for the first time. You're the first institution to buy her work. You're the first institution to, so right on. And it's like, I feel like a cheerleader and a crime fighter at the same time. We're still discovering you know, look, my latest crime victim is Helen Troy, who was married to Arthur Dove. And Helen Troy was a hell of a painter, but Arthur Dove didn't really want her to show her work, was not encouraging. And then he became very, very sick and she had to take care of him. And she was a hell of a painter. So the Heckscher Museum here on Long Island has a number of these Helen Troys. And so I'm helping them to bring her reputation up to be parallel with her husband, Arthur Dove, who she was just as good a painter as. But so that's the crime fighting part. And that's pretty fun. That's really fun to sort of correct something, you know, and say like, look at this work. Look at this work. This woman was gifted. Anyway, so yeah, it's sort of a way to right the scales. I'm very, very happy to have this foundation and very, very pleased, you know, with the individuals who have reacted very, very positively, you know, when I've approached them or when they've approached me. So anyway, but it is demystifying to be able to go and do this work and, you know, just be treated as like another business person in the business of art, right? Rather than an artist who wants something, you know. And I always say, I don't want, this is not about my work. This is about my work as a feminist. This is about my work in the philanthropic world, about reversing this marginalization. But this is not about me as an artist. I happen to be an artist. It's my job. But anyway, and in the same way, so I feel lucky that I've been able to do something that could demystify museum directors, curators, people working in museums, in the same way that I had a very short, not very short, but during a period when my son was little, I opened a gallery and I sold art and furniture, and it was called Buck House. At that point, I felt like I wasn't being supported as an artist at home, in the world. And I just needed some strokes. I needed the world to say, okay, you know, your hard drive's sharp. Keep going, keep going. You have creative ideas. And so I did get that from the world. But more importantly, when I had Buck House, I began curating. And so I would borrow works from galleries for exhibitions that I would do at Buck House. And so the gallery world became demystified to me. I wasn't afraid of dealers anymore. I wanted something from them, but I didn't want something for me. I wanted something for my gallery. I wanted a piece. I wanted to borrow a piece of art or a photograph or whatever it was. And so then they became my friends and associates. So my path that I've created has given me, I think, a really great education about the art world and about fine arts institutions, big and little. And some of the biggest ones are easier to deal with than the little ones. You know, it's just funny. It depends on who you're dealing with and you know what kind of stripes they have, you know, where they are on you know what I'm passionate about.
Well, Deborah, thank you so much for this today. It's been a pleasure talking to you about this exhibition and your work. And I could keep asking you questions, but I know that there are audience members with a couple of questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to Raven so that she can.
Great. I love questions. You know, I love questions.
Okay, great. Our first question is from GE. And I'm going to ask it on his behalf as he is traveling. So has Leonora Carrington, either her paintings or her writings or both, been an influence in your painting? Seems as though you allow the unconsciousness to direct you in a parallel in such a way in such a parallel way.
That's wild. Thank you for that. I love Leonora Carrington. I feel a great, and I'm honored to be even like referred to as in the same breath with her, because I think she was such a genius. And there was a whole school of surrealists working in Mexico, and Max Ernst, and anyway, Dorothea Tanning. But so when I was first married and I had first moved to New York, we didn't have a sofa. And I had just enough money to buy a sofa from like Conrad's or someplace. And I set out to go buy this sofa. And I came back with a Leonora Carrington print that I had stumbled upon in a gallery. And and so I didn't get the sofa, but I did get this print that I still have today. And it was of a woman floating on the back of a turtle. My husband came home and I was like, where's the sofa and when's it coming? I'm like, not yet. It's not coming, but look at what I bought instead. So yeah, she was the first piece of art that I felt really compelled to actually spend money that I didn't have on. So yes, I feel a real kindredship, you know, and her work is dark, but there's also this lyricalness to it that it really resonates for me, and that she's talking about you know, a wonderland too, but it's her wonderland that she creates. And so yeah, I mean, I feel kind of joined at the hip with Leonora Carrington.
Okay, our next question is from Dawn Delicat. And you should be able to unmute now.
Who, me?
No, Dawn.
Oh, Dawn.
Hi, Deborah.
Hi, love.
This was such a great talk. So many amazing things that you said about like being in the middle of your work and the real world and how you don't relate to the figure. But that was such a surprising thing to me, because your works are a figure, like there's such a human presence, but I feel like it's because you're in that liminal space. That's what you give us with every work. But aside from that, I have a question. So I was just wondering now, having seen your work on exhibition at the Hamptons Art Center and such a large body of it on view through Christina's curatorial eyes, I was wondering, like, as an artist now seeing that perspective and new purview of your work, like, how do you think your work will change, or has it changed now that you're back in the studio, having seen your work in this new way?
Great question. And oh, by the way, I'll give a shout out to Pen and Brush. Dawn is the executive director of Pen and Brush, which is a 125-year-old institution devoted to the work of women artists. And if you don't know about Pen and Brush, look them up, because these ladies are fierce and they're showing amazing work. And it's my privilege and my honor to be able to support them and work with them. We've worked together on any number of things. So Pen and Brush.
Thank you.
But
Thank
okay,
you.
not surprisingly, great question. Okay, wait a minute. So where was I? Okay, so the figure, wait, just what was the last part of your question?
So, you know, now that you've seen your body of work through Christina's
How will it change? Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I'm already, you know, the show is still up and I got another like 10 days. And it's been really hard to work during this time just because I'm busy running people through the show. And there've been so many things that have gone on, you know, as part and parcel of this exhibition. And I thank the Southampton Arts Center for the bang up job that they did of installing the show, of promoting the show, of activities around it. But anyway, I think maybe one of the biggest gifts that anyone could give me is a springboard to new work. And yeah, I think my work is probably going to get bigger as a result of this. I also am dying to just do black and white, and to just use the ink, or gradations of gray and white and black, just to see what that does. And because this exhibit was so, it was kind of immersive, right? I mean, you were there. So if you stood in the middle of the room, the paintings were all around you. Wherever you looked, there was a figure, a face, something. And so I'm dying to take the roll of paper and instead of cutting it at 5 feet, run it for an entire wall. Yeah.
I love it.
I think I can probably do 10 feet in my studio. So I think that's the first thing I'd like to try. And I have no idea whether that will be a success or a complete failure or what, but I don't really care. I'm not scared. So what's the worst that can happen? I paint over it. It's not like I'm not going to do that anyway. So, yeah, no, so the room that I was showing in was just enormous. I mean, I think the ceilings are like 30, 40 feet tall. So yeah, I have this notion to work kind of bigger, but still like within my wingspan. I've painted on ladders before, and I really don't want to do the ladders again. I think that no need. Yeah, I think that as a result of having to look at my work and speaking about my work so much during these 2 months, it can't help but change. It can't help but change. And there's always a dance between the abstraction and the figurative and the narrative. So I just look forward to continuing that dance, and understanding that, and I think it also let me see how the work of these 3 years, 2.5 years, really had a thread, and that, all of these, they were like a family. They're like a family of these characters. And I think I've never really had that feeling about my own work, that, oh, we're a family now. So that was kind of great too. But yeah, there were many gifts in this exhibit. Yeah, let's see what happens next.
Awesome. Can't wait to see it.
Yeah. I'll keep you posted.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Dawn and GE, for those questions. And thank you so much, Deborah, for your lovely answers and for showing us your work. And thank you so much, Chloe. We have a tradition here at the Rail to end all of our community events with a poetry reading. And I'm thrilled to welcome our poet of the day, Barbara Henning, to the stage. Born in Detroit, Barbara Henning is the author of four novels and 8 collections of poetry, as well as many chapbooks and essays. Her recent books include a hybrid biography of her mother, Fern, a Detroit story, a novel just like that, poetry collections, Digigram, and A Day Like Today. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody at the Rail for inviting me, and thanks, Deborah. It was very interesting listening to you talk about your process. I'm going to read 6 poems, short, take about 7 minutes, from a new work I'm working on called Girlfriend. They were started early on with notes that I abandoned. I've gone back to it now. I think I have 21 so far. And these are all from childhood. Dot and me, we walked to Grant Junior High School together. Our houses were squat with unkempt yards inside chain link fences, both houses with a gang of kids inside running wild, tall and short, Barb and Dot, middle school hoodlums in mind only, with black short boots and tight skirts. I stole pantyhose from the dime store. You had an allowance. Huddled together in your bedroom, we stitched up the seams of my skirt, turned me into someone else. Soft brown hair, now a wild nest smoothed over with hairspray, thick black eyeliner. 2 motherless girls. Mine died under an oxygen tent, yours in the basement when a camp stove exploded. Stepmothers soon to arrive, 13 years old and arm in arm, preparing each other for the day ahead. When we walked down 9 Mile Road, it was touch me, but then don't dare touch me. 1964. You were living with your grandmother on 9 Mile Road in an old farmhouse, still standing in a neighborhood of 1950 cinder block houses. You weren't allowed guests. I'd see the shadowy figure of your grandmother behind the door, watching you and calling your name. Come inside, Eileen. You were slim, the lines in your face and body very noir. You had long, dark brown hair and a long, elegant nose, olive skin, dark black eyeliner. You didn't do well in school. You smoked and worked at White Castle. No photo of you in the yearbook. You appeared in East Detroit High in the 11th grade. Your parents had run away in 2 different directions, leaving you behind. I'd wait for you in front of your house, and then we'd walk to school together. Quite often we'd skip school and sit in Henry's drugstore, smoking together and talking about our missing parents, perhaps, our boyfriends, our hair. I visited you once after graduation. You were living with a guy, some secret there, perhaps an abusive relationship. The color orange comes to mind. Maybe that was the color of the vinyl sofa in your apartment. The ceilings were low. The bedroom door was closed. It was dark, impenetrable, the despair. And then I never saw you again, but sometime later, I invented an imaginary world in a novel, and you were at the center, intertwined with my double. 6 sisters. Your mother, you, and your 6 sisters moved into the rundown house a block away from us. We would take the bus together to and from school. You started your senior year late, transferred in from Roseville, a black coat wrapped around your thin body. We huddled in a corner in the attic in your house smoking. Your mother was passed out on the couch. She drinks, you said, rolling your eyes. Little girls in every room. You bleached my hair platinum to my father's dismay. Our favorite spot was the bowling alley, cussing out the waitress for trying to tell us what to do. How old are you girls? You got to be 18 to smoke in here. Your father would show up once in a while in a big car wearing a fancy suit. He'd leave the girls a box of candy. The drive-ins, you're in the front seat with your boyfriend, Jim. I'm in the back with Peasy. The lighted screen over the parking lot, catching it now and again from a horizontal position. At 5 to 11, my father was waiting at the door with a list of questions about the movie. What could he do? Nothing. I was on my way out. Your last name. You had a mother and a father and a quiet home life. When I pick you up, you'd wave to your mother standing in the doorway, a short, stout woman with big arms like my grandmother. We'd slide in and out of the drive-ins talking to boys. Your mother wasn't angry when you came home late. I think you talked to her about everything. Your life was curious to me, safe in a way. After I ran away from home, you had a job in a bank on Gratiot Avenue, and you would pass phone money to my little sister so she could call me. I went out with your brother a few times. We made out, and then I don't know why, but I kept going out with someone else at the same time, even though I really liked him, and I've thought about him often. He went to Vietnam. I don't even know if he came back. You followed your boyfriend, married him, living in military housing in Kentucky. We talked on the phone a couple times, wrote a few letters, but I never saw you again. And I couldn't find you later because I didn't know your married name. Roommates, 1967, we were roommates for a while on Ashland on the east side of Detroit. When you and your baby came home from the hospital, I was sleeping on the couch. My ex-boyfriend lived across the alley in our apartment with another girlfriend. You dressed up in a negligee and I took photos to send to your husband, Private Jim Bradford. He was in Vietnam. Later in the night, we talked over coffee about your Jim and my new boyfriend just home from the Marines. Forget the one in back, you said. Get married and have a baby with a guy outside in his car waiting for you. I used to take care of your baby, but now I only remember a photograph with cereal on his face. I try to find you every so often, but when your name changes with this marriage and that marriage, and you keep moving further and further into the suburbs, finally you disappear. This is the last one. A gleam in her eye. When I first met you, you were 18 years old with long brown hair, married at 14. You already had 4 children. Your husband was a construction worker. He ordered you around like his servant. Kathy, get me a beer, do this, do that. I remember sitting in the kitchen on Manistee when you used a big thick needle and a chunk of ice to pierce my ears. Close your eyes, you said, as you initiated me into womanhood. 10 years later at an ethnic festival, I was selling lemonade in a concession on the waterfront. Spooky Armenian music was broadcasting over the loudspeakers and only a few people on the midway. In the middle of the afternoon, the clouds were dark and suddenly you appeared, walking along with a bag of books. You had just started law school, you said, with a gleam in your eye. You left your husband a few years earlier and your mother was watching the children. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Barbara. That was amazing. And thank you, Deborah and Chloe. And thank you, everyone, for joining this conversation today. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive. You can view today's event and our full archive on the Rail's YouTube channel. Over the past 22 years, the Brooklyn Rail has brought together art, music, dance, film, theater, literature, and thoughtful social and political meditations in our monthly publication and in our public events, like here in our daily NSE. Please check the chat for a link to donate and support our writers, editors, and operations here at the Rail. And you can join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Pamela Patsimo Sundstrom and Yazi Alipur on the event of I Have Withheld Much More Than I Have Written at Galerie Lalonde. We conclude with a poetry reading by Diana Hu. And you can now turn on your microphones and say goodbye as you leave. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all so
Thank
much.
you.
so
Thanks,
much.
Barbara.
Thank you,
Beautiful
Deborah.
Brooklyn Rail.
Thank you,
Chloe,
Deborah and
Raven.
Chloe. Great.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
And go
Thank
see
you
the
very much.
show.
Okay, let's.
Great artwork.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.